worked in really large organizations. Like, Alistair, what's the biggest size organization you've worked in?
Look, it's not the size of the Americas or in Europe, but you're looking at about, actually, we're busy with a 48,000 strong organization right now. And I think there's another one coming on with about 130,000 in Europe. But in South Africa, you're looking at anything between 4 and 15,000. That's what you're given. But it really depends on the vertical. So your banks, your financial institutions, government, those sort of organizations tend to spend time in meetings to discuss what they're going to discuss in the following meeting. Whereas your retail, completely different story. If you don't have a storyboard coming into a meeting, don't bother showing up. Don't bother organizing the meeting. But there's a lot to be said about the types of meetings, depending on the industry vertical that you actually engaging with, because they typically, and I'd love for banks to run an E5 with Delph, just to have a look at how much time is wasted in your calendar.
All right, thumbs up, guys. It looks like we are live, and passing that ball over to Lorian Strand.
Hello, everybody. I am Lorian Strand from Down Under in Australia. It's nice and early here, 7:30 in the morning. I will be chairing today and hopefully kind of trying to keep my cloud mouth to a minimum and letting the other guys talk for a bit. So I'd like to introduce, in alphabetical order by first name, Alistair from South Africa. Say hello, Alistair.
Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. I think it's the 3 different time zones right now.
That it is. And Owen, who is now able to talk freely. So please introduce yourself. It's good to be here. And if you can give a bit more context as to that comment I just made about how you can now talk freely.
You bet. I finished up my second tour of duty at Microsoft about 2 weeks ago, and I started a independent consulting company called some random name, Alpine Lakes Digital. But the focus is on change management and for Office 365 and everything that we're all talking about right now. There's a huge gap where companies don't understand, or they don't have the right meetings in order to understand what their strategy for moving to the cloud should be. And I think this is a great topic to break the ice in terms of talking about how Office 365 can come to bear for an organization.
So thank you for joining us, and glad that you can join us, and welcome to your first Regarding Office 365 live stream. Also, speaking of first live streams, Simon Terry, also from Down Under.
Hi everyone, Simon Terry from Change Agents Worldwide. Just as Owen was saying, focus on helping organizations get the magic out of Office 365 and Yammer and other technologies as they look at better ways of working. Great to be here.
So I think 3 out of 4 of us are now specializing in change management. Or are you doing that as well, Alistair?
No. And
okay.
There's an element, but no. There's educated people to go engage with business. No.
Fair enough. All right. So the purpose of today's topic is to talk about meeting etiquette. And I think it started with, or the inspiration for this conversation started with Alistair talking about the frustration he had with somebody calling him to say, where are you from this meeting, when he didn't actually accept. And I think we've all had these stories. So can you give us a bit more context about that?
Yeah, so I think it was Tuesday evening, and I got a mail after 5, not that it's an issue, a meeting request to attend a prep session for another session the following morning at 9. And on my way to the office, I think it was 9:02, I got the call from the person requesting the meeting saying, where are you? And my question was, but I didn't click the button to accept the meeting. But at the same time, I didn't tentatively say I might not be there or decline. And that's how the debate started on Facebook, and everyone just climbed in, giving their opinion about why don't you accept, or why didn't you say tentatively, and that's where the discussion started.
And I think not wanting to stray too far from the topic around meetings, I had a colleague in my previous role who was notorious for not responding to emails, including meeting requests. So they would just sit in his calendar. He wouldn't decline. He wouldn't accept. And so I'd turn to him and say, "Are we having this meeting now?" He'd say, "Oh, yeah." So, I think that one of the misconceptions that people have is this view that I don't want to fill the sender, the organizer's inbox with clutter, so I'll accept the meeting but won't send a response. But little do they know that Outlook doesn't process a non-response. It's not an Exchange server-side process. It's client-side. So if you don't send the response in the first place, the person doesn't know if you're attending or not attending. So, Alton, tell us, why did you not respond to that person in the first place?
Well, I suppose it was frustration that you sent it to me after working hours, which is fine. I don't have an issue with that. But the expectation of me just randomly showing up without actually saying it was actually leading up to that. But it was more about, we've had several meetings before that, and I was just tired of having another meeting to discuss the same thing. So that, and also where our offices are situated, people know that I don't get in there before. I'll be there for a meeting at 10, not at 9 because of traffic. So I'm not going to get into traffic at 7, spend then 70 minutes in traffic to get to a meeting at 8:30 or 9. And that's a common thing in the office. So I was a bit peeved off that there were discussions around, you need to be here at 9, when you very well know that I don't get to the office at 9. And if I should be there, I can do a Skype call and we can have the conversation, because there wasn't even the option for a Skype call. So it was courtesy versus courtesy, mono or mono sort of thing.
Hey, whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to that every meeting will get a Skype meeting feature that Office 365 was going to bring it?
I was about to say, I think it's still in development, and I do look forward to that coming. But I think there'll be some requirement for, I guess, meeting spaces to facilitate Skype for Business meetings, because it'll be all very well and good that your meeting supports Skype for Business. But if you're going to physically be in a meeting room, you got to make sure that it's got some hardware in there so at least people can join in remotely. But I was going to ask, you worked in Microsoft, and obviously, Simon, you worked at a bank. These are organizations of tens of thousands of people. You guys would have just had meetings upon meetings upon meetings upon meetings.
So I agree. An awful lot of meetings comes down to the protocol in terms of what's the responsibility of the attendee. And I agree, there are some people who will never accept a meeting. You kind of learn to deal with that. But I think what we're missing during the pre-call is maybe there's a more defined role for the organizer. I think it's silly that Alistair had to have a meeting that had 0 working hours between the request and when it happened. That's like an instantaneous meeting if you think about it. Friday at 5 p.m. to Monday at 9 a.m., same thing. And it's disrespectful. But the meeting organizers need to be able to say, hey, if somebody hasn't responded, they need to send an email, or they need to they need to take responsibility for who is attending that meeting, whether it's tracking responses or not. And so I think a little bit more formality in an organization around what's the role of a meeting organizer. Just like I firmly believe that if a meeting doesn't have an agenda and notes sent out afterwards, then it's just the same as a hallway conversation. We need to have a place where meeting notes and agendas are expected and are followed up. I mean, sometimes people are stuck in traffic and can't make the meeting.
Yeah. And I mean, very similar to what Owen's saying there, Lorian. For me, the person calling the meeting needs to put the work into understanding why the meeting's happening and why they've chosen the participants, what role they play, what outcome they expect from the meeting, what pre-work needs to be done before the meeting happens. And there's a great line that most organizations require layers of approval to spend $100. But you can call a meeting with thousands of dollars of burn rate in the room with no thought at all. You could invite 16 people into a room and say, hey, I just wanted to get you here to, spitball some ideas. And it's like, if people haven't put the process into what do I want for this meeting? What do they need to know? What role are they playing? What outcomes do I want? How am I going to chair this meeting, just as Lorian's chairing this call, to achieve a particular outcome? Then, I don't think they've done the work. So I used to insist on those things as in Alistair's scenario, I just wouldn't have gone to the meeting, because if those criteria hadn't been met, I never attended meetings and I'd decline them immediately. And it's also, there's bad political behaviours that happen when people say, but I sent you the meeting invite, you didn't show up, and we decided to change your business while you weren't there. Those kinds of things need to be avoided.
Are you hearing us here, Lorian?
We lost you, Lorian.
Yeah, we can't hear him.
Mute button.
Mute button. Meeting etiquette.
Just didn't do anything. Anyway.
Muting etiquette was good.
That's good. So I wrote an article on my Office 365 Good Etiquette Guide around no mas, which is mutual acceptance syndrome, where we just get a meeting invite and press accept without really thinking, should I attend this meeting? Does this meeting have a real purpose? What's the value out of my time? Because I think a lot of times you probably see this in more professional services firms where everyone's billable per hour. But if we were to run a internal workshop of a 1 hour long among let's say our engineers who are, let's say, an hourly rate of $200 an hour, and that's 1 hour. So that's $2,000 that workshop has cost me. What have I gotten out of it? How have I gotten, that usually works out to be a full day's worth of billing. Have I gotten the value out of that? So I think that's probably more visible in professional services firms because they see the billables that are lost. Whereas I think when you're internal to a firm, that's often forgotten because there's no direct hourly cost of people attending the meetings. So therefore people just send meetings and meetings and meetings. And as you said, Simon, before, people have a meeting to have a meeting. So yeah, I think the first thing that probably comes down to is the organizer probably has to think, why am I having this meeting? Is this the best use of my time? And as someone pointed out to me some time ago, Outlook defaults to 30-minute meetings. Perhaps if we had 15-minute meetings, we'd get through things a lot faster.
I disagree that it's less important for somebody who's not a professional service firm. It might not be quite as close to your daily billing rate because that's not as billable, but with multiple organizations, dragging people in from other groups into a meeting has a very serious cost, I think. And so it's just as important. And I think the organization runs a risk if they don't make sure it's clear that people are allowed to decline a meeting.
I agree. I mean, one of the things I always tried to explain to people is that in my view, there's probably 4 main purposes of a meeting. There's to share information, to make a decision, to discuss a complex issue and get shared understanding, or to just meet people and build rapport. And if you kind of look at each of those things, there's actually better ways of doing a number of those. And sometimes it really comes down to the discussing complex issues and building rapport are the only good reasons for face-to-face meetings, because sharing information can be done other ways. Making decisions can usually be done in a much more effective way than in a large meeting. So, that considering what the meeting's for and shifting its purpose to many of the other channels that Office 365 offers. If you want to work collaboratively on a document, there are better ways to do it than sitting around a board table.
And absolutely agree. I think it goes to that point I made earlier. I think we'll in the preamble about the presentation versus collaboration. A lot of the times meetings aren't necessarily set up to be an actual meeting. We've got a table and a screen at the end of it. And one of the things, I was at a regional council, not a regional, Outer Burbs Council yesterday, and I was doing a presentation in this room, and I walked into it, and yeah, there's tables, there's a PC at the front, and there's a presentation screen. I went, this is not a place to make decisions and work on things together, or even have. This is a room for everyone to look at a screen and talk across the table. There is no way for external participants to join in, and there's no space for people to actually get up and move around and work together. There's no whiteboard. And I think that's a big thing. And yes, this is my love of Surface Hub coming through. But I think that's the thing, is the meeting has to have the right intent. Do I want to talk at you and get a yes, no, maybe a couple of bits of input, or do I actually want to work with you on something? But yeah, I think if we look at the starting point, when open question to the floor, when you guys send a meeting invite, do you just send the meeting subject, or do you add a few lines into the body of the invite to give it some more context?
I suppose it's a build-up from where the meeting stemmed from, because you can't just ad hoc randomly go request a meeting if you haven't had a conversation about, okay, maybe we should meet, or we have a normal standing meeting that happens weekly. It would really come from where it's stemming from. I've gotten into the habit now of, okay, these are the things I want to discuss in the meeting, so that we don't get there and then everything goes off in a tangent because someone is stood up and got into their soapbox and started carrying on about how they're feeling about a specific person or a specific task that was allocated. And then you could always steer the meeting back to the agenda so that there's viable or tangible outcomes. Because a lot of times you go sit in a meeting and an hour later you walk out and you go, well, was anything decided in the meeting, or did we just go sit there so that we could ramble on incoherently about random shit? So agendas in meetings with deliverables, so you don't have to get as precise as, okay, well, these are the meeting minutes, and I start using people's initials to assign tasks to you and those sort of things, but at least have a purpose so that you can come back to it at the end of the meeting and say, well, in closing, these are the decisions that we made, because generally meetings have some sort of core focus around what the outcome should be. If it's just a meet and greet to say, hi, I'm so-and-so, and this is what I've been doing, or we need to make a decision on when we're closing a project. These things need to be articulated correctly, and without an agenda, you're walking into a room and you don't know what the actual purpose outside of a subject matter that's in the subject line.
I was in poor habit of just putting in the subject line and coming to grips with some of the tools and things that are available. Two things, like I think that, yes, we totally have to have focus before we come to the meeting to make sure that we are getting value. One thing I try and do is turn that original email into a meeting invite. So, you can do that. Which includes all the body of the email. You could have a quick scan through and remove whatever you need to, but at least the conversation is there. And I think that's key in a lot of the trends we're seeing with the Microsoft tech. Is it's all focused around the conversation and given a lot of context. So I try and do that, but I also bullet point a few things that are either going to be the questions to answer, the purpose of the meeting, expected outcomes, so that people can do pre-work if they need to. And I know we're all busy people. We don't necessarily have the 10, 15 minutes that we can put into doing some pre-work. But for those who can, it just helps move that along. So I've begun to form some good habits around that.
I think the other good reason for putting the outcomes from the meeting in the meeting invite or communicating them some other way is it enables people to call the meeting to an end. We've all been in those meetings where the job was done, but the meeting goes on because it goes on to the end of its allotted time. And I'm always impressed with people who can get up at the moment the key decision is made or the key information is shared and just walk out of the room because job's done, right? We don't need to keep meeting. I've got a half hour back in my day. Let's go.
Instead of the
best phrase ever.
Instead of the usual or the very common more so. Okay, so anything else anybody wants to discuss?
Yeah.
No,
Hey, you know,
stop.
It's
How
you
was the
know,
football
you know,
on the
one
weekend,
point,
go back
Ryan?
to work. Can we?
Yeah.
one point
The
that I'd
thing
like
that.
to add.
Sorry, go ahead.
One point that I'd like to add that kind of ties some of these together in terms of determining the context of the meeting and also determining whether to have a meeting is I think it's bringing in the Office 365 tech again. It's really important to think, what's the community around the meeting? Because if it's like a walking deck introductory type meeting, then generally you're going to have 5 or 6 of those meetings, and you need to have a community space where all of those different people can access your resources and maybe your tasks and follows. But if it's on a series of meetings, then a meeting space, whether it's OneDrive or whether it's SharePoint or whether it's Yammer, or whether it's Teams, whatever, doesn't matter. But thinking about the community around the meetings totally adds so much more value and context and helps with these decisions. It's no longer just, do we have a meeting, but what's the community and what's the context around the meeting? And I think that is what's changing over the last 18 months, and going forward, the more we can get organizations to change that way, the more we can change this whole conversation.
And I think that's where Teams does a good job, is Teams is the context. The context remains within the one thing. So a meeting is simply added on to the existing flow of conversation. The point that I wanted to raise, people who know me well enough know that I can be hot-headed. Sometimes it can cause people to break pedals on bikes. But they also know that I spike up and cool down pretty damn quick. The two things around meetings that probably get my blood boiling the most would be the meeting invite when I'm clearly busy because you haven't used the scheduling assistant to see when I'm available, and the decline with no response. So not decline with proposed new time, but just decline with no response. How do you guys handle that? Because for me, that's a immediate, I hate your guts. I mean, I calm down from that, but it gets me going.
With a scheduling assistant to start with, probably not as crucial in small to medium businesses, but certainly when you're a larger company or you've got teams that are working in different areas. That was one of my pet peeves, look, it's as simple as clicking that button and checking my availability. And what I often do now too is, for the people that I work with often within the teams that I do, I'll share my calendar with full details, because I want them to know, look, if you want to know what I'm up to, here it is. So scheduling assistant, it's been there since, I don't know, who's an Exchange person here? Anyone? No?
I think it's been there since Schedule Plus.
Yeah. So it's been there for a long time. That's just one of my pet peeves. I forgot the next question. I'll pass it over to someone else.
Decline with no response.
Deny with no response.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. It's like saying, conversation over. It's not like, I want to have that conversation with you, but here's a better time, or look, can we catch up another time? It's talk to the decline hand.
Yeah. The other one that's related to decline with no response is the cancellation that arrives 5 minutes before the meeting's about to start.
The worst.
And it's like, what? Hang on a minute. This doesn't suit you now. Like, especially if someone had to travel and all those kinds of things. So, people need to be thoughtful about that. There is the other thing I've seen a bit of, mostly with senior executives, is the to beat the schedule assistant, they load in a meeting for their entire week to block out the entire calendar, so that you have to come through a gatekeeper, or you have to make a call or something. And I think to the point about that, there is a huge opportunity to work out loud and to share more of what we're doing. Most of what we're doing is not secret. The more we can make our work visible to our colleagues, the more productive everyone can be.
And I think that's a really good point. I mean, I have a tendency to block myself out for potentially entire days or half days or several hours, whatever it might be. So one of the things I've found over the years is people would come to me and say, look, I want to have a meeting with you, or schedule a meeting with a customer and you, or whatever it might be. but your calendar's so chock I can't find a free space. And that's where I'd say, well, look for something that doesn't involve other people, because you can see that by looking at someone's calendar, or look for these type of responses, because usually I'll put like internal in capital letters. And that's where, as Daryl said, I'll share my calendar so people can see what I'm actually doing. And so I'll say, look, just schedule something and just, book over it. But if you book over where I've got what is clearly a meeting with other people, that's where I'm like, well, that's just disrespectful. That's like cutting across a car lane without an indicator and almost clipping my car.
So is this
it's not humans.
Yeah, is this a good time to mention too about find time versus find arc time, and the recent little feature that's been added to 365? Trying to find that common time that everyone can meet has often been a challenge. And we have had that schedule assistant, which requires a bit more intelligence, right? It's the burden's on us to find that spot, and there's plenty of stuff there to help. But putting that onus back onto, hey, here's where I'm available, here's 3 times, putting that out there for vote, and then getting people to either choose the one that's going to suit them or suggest another time. So I really like that this garage project that was sort of a side thing that Microsoft were doing, Microsoft developers, became an actual really useful feature, and it's just come into 365. Have any of you guys made use of something like that?
I've used find time a fair bit, but I find it's only beneficial for external people, because internally I can generally see everybody's calendar, so I can make a decision or a best judgment. But I've only found it's really beneficial for external people whose calendars I can't see.
Yeah. I mean, I love it I find people are more decisive when you give them a narrow range of options than when you give them blocks of time. So I will always use, here are the options I'm available, choose the one that works for you. The other one is if I usually in correspondence, if you're saying I'm available anytime except 2 p.m., you always get the meeting request for 2 p.m. I don't know how that feature kind of happens, but people pick that time.
Well, totally agree. Has anybody here used the Cortana calendar.help scheduling assistant? Because I haven't used it with a real person, and I don't think I ever will, because to me that's another talk to the hand. You can talk to a bot. I'm too busy to talk to you to figure this out. Talk to this computer. What are people's thoughts on these scheduling assistants?
Oh, look,
I think we're going to end up there.
What's that, Al?
The scheduling assistant has been around for almost 15 years. I think it came out with Exchange 2000. I remember seeing some crazy demos where you could SMS a reply to move things around and all of those things. But on the back of the scheduling assistant, what people don't do is look at and factor in travel time. So yes, I am not busy between 1 and 2, but I've got to travel from my 12 to get somewhere so that I can be there at 1. So people will go, and I've actually got a good friend of mine that will book his travel time separately after the meeting into his calendars.
Yep,
definitely. You have to do that.
So that people can actually see, because they'll go, well, but you're not busy from 1 to 2. Yeah, but I am 60, 70 kilometers away, and it's going to take me an hour and a half in traffic to get there. So don't get annoyed when I decline it, because I've got to travel somewhere. And that comes back to etiquette around. Okay,
I found that when you book your travel time, if you put in on the subject, you put available via cell and your number, that a lot of people can then say, oh, well, I'm going to book that and we'll do it by phone. And that can be very helpful.
That's a good idea.
I just think everyone's just right.
Well, see, I usually just write travel, but I think that's a really good idea. I hadn't thought about it. Is travel available via phone? That's a great idea.
Especially if people are thinking that, hey, I want to book this meeting with them, and then they see you're traveling right now, anyway.
Yeah.
So, Simon, you were saying
related,
with the bots.
Related to that theme is I'm really good at when people call up asking for a meeting, asking if we can do it right now. and you just kill it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Simon, you were saying with back to my bot question that that's kind of going to be the way of the future. From an etiquette perspective, though, do you think that if I'm introducing Cortana to handle my meetings, and I guess most people in IT would know who Cortana is, whereas people outside may not necessarily. So I guess there's some brand value there that people can introduce Cortana and people go, oh, hi Cortana, how are you today? But do you think that it would be better placed that the bot would actually just act on behalf of me? So it looks like you're still having a conversation with Laurie and Strant instead of Cortana to schedule a meeting. Do you think that would go down better?
Look, it'll be interesting to see how it develops, because that's how some of the competitor products to that Cortana feature work. So they impersonate an assistant, essentially. And I think we will end up in the ethics of AI. I already know someone who has developed a junk text strategy for AI bots. So basically, they have developed documents full of junk text that they just cut and paste into the bot until the bot puts its hands up and says, I don't know, and throws them out to a human being.
That's not cool.
So the lorem ipsum of bot destruction, here's all this lorem ipsum text until the bot says, I don't know what you're saying, let me transfer you to a human being. And that may happen too.
I kind of like the idea of having a personal assistant that actually has a conversation and that can handle my bookings. I mean, that's great. I'm never gonna have a physical personal assistant. I don't think I'd be able to manage that. I'm not a C-level. I'm not a CEO of an organization, and never will I be, because well, who knows? But having someone say, he's not available at the specific time, I do have another slot. I think that's great. And the geek factor in me, I want a sphere floating over my right shoulder that I can say, Igor, dial. And Igor must say, yes, master. So that'll be great to have a Cortana-like
the bots will get there.
Interface. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So I think we've covered a variety of things from basic etiquette through to bots and the etiquette around bots. I think the key thing here is there's not necessarily one right way, but there's certainly better ways. And we've got, especially when we look at 365 alone, we've got the tools within it to be better meeting people. I can't think of better wordage right now. It's still only 8 a.m. But yeah, I think we've got the tools, we have the technology, we can make it work. So I think a big part of this is just educating people on how to be better meeting citizens. The chair back to Daryl so he can promo the next thing. So,
cheers. Thank you. Okay, all the bad puns, but obvious ones, right? So that it's all inclusive and everyone can laugh. Thanks for sharing that, Lauren. Thank you guys for putting in your valuable opinions and thoughts about how meetings should be run and etiquette. It's all really valuable stuff. So I just wanted to do a quick round off and promo for the next live stream, because I went a little big on this one. So our regarding Office 365 team, actually everyone who's joining us here is part of that team. We contribute articles, and as you can see, we jump on live streams to give a bit more volume to what we would like to share with people. So we've got our Facebook page, which some of you are viewing from. We've got our YouTube channel where we also try and push our live content and archive it, and our Medium publication. So that's reoffice365.com. Now, our next live stream, we've managed to snag Mark Cashman from the Microsoft SharePoint product group, who is going to join us after the SharePoint Virtual Summit announcements. So we're expecting a lot of really big things to be talked about there. They've kept it very hush-hush in terms of the kind of content, but Mark's going to help us with some Q&A afterwards. So we're going to get another panel together. We'll, of course, do our live stream. But when I said I went a little big with this one, I'm going to be presenting at a conference coming up in New Zealand called the Digital Workplace Conference. And I realized, oops, I've double booked it. What did I do with my meetings, guys? I cocked it up, right? Excuse me. So I thought, hey, do I find a quiet little corner and some bandwidth and try and just join in and do what I'm doing here? Or do I reach out to Debbie Ireland and say, hey, maybe I'll borrow a booth and a screen? And she said, well, why don't you run it as a session? So that's how we're doing it. Big combo,
Awesome,
okay?
awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to do this. It's going to be on stage. We're going to have Mark coming in, a few other people who are, thought leaders in the SharePoint space. We might be able to grab Ben Nyland. Who else was coming down? Jeff Willinger. I think Christian Buckley as well. Someone, yeah, exactly, hunky dory. So live, right? But then I've got this thing out, and I'm going to be roaming the stage, or rather roaming the audience with my camera, and going and asking questions of the audience, selfieing with Skype for Business, and getting a full-on interaction going there. So it could either go horribly wrong, or it could be something pretty big. So we'll see. Just tune into that. Look out for when we promo that live stream and schedule it. It'll be in a couple of weeks' time. But yeah, again, thank you guys for joining us today. Thank you, Lauren, for refereeing, and we'll see you again next time, hopefully soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.
Shuffle those
Thanks,
papers
guys.
as we end off those live streams.
No paper here. Thanks, guys. Take care.
I need the fade out.
Disconnecting.